Hey guys, so welcome to the first episode that'll be focusing on the Doctor Strange series from the 70s. It's something that I've been interested in a long time in this series. I have some early stuff. They were kind of the Doctor Strange classics, I think there was, a 4-issue series with Ditko, Art, and Stan Lee. And I've got a collection that's just the black and white reproductions of a bunch of those old Strange Tales stories. Always been kind of fascinated in this kind of thing. Even when I was reading DC, I really liked Dead Man series, and I really loved the Spectre series and stuff like that. And even so far as like Shade the Changing Man, you know, stuff that was a little kind of stranger and sometimes mystical. So this one has always kind of been fascinating to me, but I never really knew where to start. So I just kind of finally dived in and decided to start with like the 70s stuff and get a whole bunch of issues. I think I might have the first 16 or something now. I can't really remember. When I did my comic shop order, that would have been the last time you heard me talk about and show some of the issues that I finally got. So I've started reading them. I actually just finished reading a few issues in a row here. And I wanted to talk about what is going to turn into basically the first 5 issues. As you can see down there, all lined out, ready to go. The first 5 issues, which actually is the first story arc, with a character called the Silver Dagger, Doctor Strange, and his apprentice / love interest, Clea. In the first issue here, as it kind of introduced the Doctor in his world, it made mention here, Marvel Premiere number 14. So before I read this issue, just to kind of give myself a little bit of the backstory, I went back and I read number 14, which was a pretty fantastic issue on its own. The creative team, Steve Englehart, writer across the board for all of these so far. Frank Brunner, also the artist across the board. And then every once in a while also listed as co-plotter, I believe is what they listed as. So whether that means that he co-wrote the story, or maybe it was just insofar as he planned out the panels and the pages and the breakdowns and that sort of thing. Dick Giordano on inks, who I believe is the same across the board as well too. G. Ween on this Marvel Premiere and on the number 1 issue does colors. The colorist changes throughout the whole time, as does the letterer. The guy who does lettering on this is John Costanza, and then Roy Thomas is the editor across the board. So first things first, this one is size Neg Genesis. So you can see there, one of the characters that focuses on is size Neg, whose name backwards is Genesis. And it's Doctor Strange and Mordo following this size Neg throughout history as he tries to absorb powers from throughout history to increase his magic in his pursuit of becoming a god, because he feels he's past humanity and it's his right to become this god. So they follow him through time and space in this kind of battle, and Doctor Strange tries to kind of change his mind towards humanity, saying that, you know, it's everything is hopeful and we shouldn't leave them behind, and we all kind of come from the same. So it's broken down into 4 chapters. Really impressive issue, a really good introduction as far as giving you kind of an overview of the Doctor. You can see there, size Neg is becoming more ethereal, and he's becoming more kind of like a spirit and hovering head. And what's interesting, besides that crack there you go, focus, that's it, oh yeah. What's interesting is finally at the end, of course, he does come to his senses and realize that, you know, everything is the same, and he brings them to the creation of the universe, where he reverses time. The Big Bang implodes, Mordo and Doctor Strange are left in darkness. Size Neg comes back and realizes now that he is completely all-knowing. He realizes his mistake and realizes that, you know, humanity is as perfect as possible, and he's going to recreate the universe, and renames himself the god Genesis, and he creates the universe as we know it. So very cool little story there. So that kind of leads us into this one. Again, same creative team as the previous, and as I said before, it just kind of starts off with a introduction to the Doctor and to Clea, and as he's sitting and kind of meditating, she comes to see him, and he realizes that he's neglected Clea both as a man and as your mentor in the mystic arts. I've been preoccupied, as well might a man who has met God and witnessed creation. So he kind of, obviously he's been preoccupied, but now he's starting to realize he's got to keep teaching Clea and spending time with her, both as a man and her master. And then we're introduced to the Silver Dagger, who comes in because he is looking for the Eye of Agamotto, and he kills, for lack of a better word, he kills Doctor Strange. He stabs Doctor Strange, and Doctor Strange tries to heal himself. Uses the Orb of Agamotto and the Cloak of Levitation to start to heal himself. That's one of the interesting things about this series. There's all these magical amulets, and there's all these spells, and they've all got these odd names, and I don't know, it's really interesting. I mean, I don't know much about like what would be kind of black magic or magic in general, so maybe a lot of these things are based on some real writings that they've researched. I'm not 100% sure, but it's interesting enough because it really brings you into the world, and you accept that this is what's going on, and it just makes it kind of fascinating. So he tries to heal himself and then gets sucked into the orb, where he is now in unreality, and there's a good kind of splash page of that. The art throughout the series so far has been pretty fantastic. The colors have been really great. They get a little better later on, and some of kind of the psychedelic type imagery that is associated with the Ditko era, you can definitely see that it's still around in the 70s, although a different sort of form. So he goes into the orb and into unreality and kind of feels he's going to be trapped there because his body is dead now, and he's not sure if he's alive or if he's dead, and realizes that he wants to try to fight to be alive. So that kind of starts him on his quest. Which brings us to, I'm just going to change my page here. I made notes throughout, so if I kind of stumble, it's just that I'm referring to my notes there. Which brings us to Doctor Strange number 2 from August 1974. So this is one of the issues that has Englehart and Brunner as co-plotters. And the rest of the creative team is still the same. Giordano on inks. Except for the coloring. Sorry, Frank Brunner is the artist and the colorist on this issue. So it's just kind of continuing the idea of Doctor Strange in this orb and in this unreality, but now he's starting to realize that he can gain, that he has maybe more control over this unreality than he thought he did. And in this first page we see the Silver Dagger cutting the head off of a dummy of Doctor Strange to kind of prove to Clea that he is in fact the one who has killed Doctor Strange, and he does have this power, and nothing is going to stop him. And you get a kind of sense of where he's coming from. He's looking to kind of convert her from the dark arts into kind of following his cause, and his cause he feels is just for God to go and cleanse the world of all these darker arts. And you find out later on that how he's done that is he's gone and mastered a lot of the darker arts, but still feeling that he's kind of God's hand in the real world, and it's his job to save souls and things. And quite honestly, isn't really the most... His character is okay. I guess it's a good enough tool, I suppose, but his character throughout doesn't really impress me. It seems a little kind of obvious, but overall, I mean, it moves the story along more. it moves the story along finely enough. Thankfully, they don't spend too much time on it. That what they're basically doing throughout these issues is focusing on Doctor Strange's journey as he kind of accepts this unreality. Runs into the Silver Surfer in this, and also then runs into the Defenders laid out there. Kind of an Alice in Wonderland theme. Hits a couple of times, as you saw in the previous one. There's a giant caterpillar he has a conversation with, and this is kind of like the tea party. They're all drinking tea, and they're all wasted though, and yeah, he sees a version of his self there. So he's kind of with the surfer. He's his ethereal kind of form, sees his human form, and wants to reunite with it. I think that's the biggest thing about the series that I really do enjoy, is this kind of internal battle. It's one of the things I can see how it might be a turnoff, because it's not, so far it's not a lot of like superheroics or anything. It's a lot of him struggling with reality and what is reality and how much control he has over his reality, no matter where it is, and how much control he has over his own magic powers, and how he's kind of developing as this master of the mystic arts, and becoming at peace with himself. I mean, at the beginning of this one, I like that little spread there too at the bottom, that bottom panel. He realizes at this point, sorry, just to kind of just to hold off on one sec. He realizes at this point that he is in control of this reality. He realizes now he has to travel to the center of the orb to confront death. And once he realizes that, all the characters that are in it also realize it, because they're extensions of himself. So when he kind of comes to that realization, you get this great panel that's like from some 70s metal cover, heavy metal cover or something like that. I don't know, some record cover. Pretty fantastic nonetheless. Yeah, and his use of, like, I think what I was saying was, even early on in this one, we see him, before his soul gets eaten, we see him kind of meditating on the fact of, like, I must meditate to comprehend this cosmos. So he just is really, there's a lot of that sort of thing that I really, really enjoy. It's kind of like this inner journey of one character. So that's going to be something that'll be very appealing over the issues, I think. Which brings us to number, I think this has been 10 minutes or so now, 12, 13 minutes. Number 3. This one is kind of a flashback issue. You get the first page. This is from September 1974. For the new parts of it, it's Engelhart, Brunner, and Al Weiss on art, Tom Orchowski on lettering, Jan Brunner, colorist, and Roy Thomas, editor again. So we get a first page as he's traveling to the center of the orb to confront death. We get his mind wandering back to how he first met Clea, which gives us a chance to again relive a flashback scene of a Stan Lee Ditko issue where he first met her. And it's actually, I didn't read it because I've read the story a few times, but I did kind of flip through it, and what I found really interesting was to see kind of almost a side by side. Now that you've gotten kind of used to this world, it's nice to kind of get jarred back to where it all came from and seeing Ditko's art. And while I love this series so far, the 70s stuff, and I like the kind of psychedelic images, there's something really unique. Obviously, I'm not saying it's something that people don't really know about Ditko's art and his panels and his use of kind of these blank backgrounds, but still making this unbelievably twisted kind of other world that really jumps out at you. And just doing it with like just some strange lines and some nice colors and kind of surrealist type images and all that. So it's a good issue for that, but there's nothing new that we learn in this. I'll just flip to the back. There's nothing new that we learn in this. He kind of comes to again and realizes he's really close and he's not going to fail. I'm going to confront the unconfrontable, death itself, and I will triumph, is what he says before we go on to issue number 4. and this one is October 1974. Englehart, writer, Brunner, artist, Giordano, inks, Tom Orrs, lettering, L. Lessman on color, and Roy Thomas again is editor. Where Boundaries Decay is this one, where Doctor Strange meets death, and basically, I'm not going to, in these reviews of Doctor Strange, what I'm not going to do is hesitate on telling you the full story, so, because I don't really see them as spoilers, necessarily, because I think with this book it's going to be more about the journey of the character, where the kind of details in the stories are going to be, as opposed to you're going to hit one nugget and that's going to spoil the other issues, because I don't think that that will happen at all, because it really is about the art and the journey and the kind of small bits throughout the way of his travels. So in this one he finally does confront death, is terrified. On his journey he goes through this town where people are on kind of in limbo, and they want to die but they can't. They heard he was coming, so they're all kind of hanging around this doorway in hopes that once he slips through to death they can kind of slip in behind him. But he's the only one that's allowed to pass. The door kind of closes and the rest of the people, the rest of the souls in limbo are still trapped there. And we get a nice kind of page, kind of reminiscent of Ditko a little bit, but I really dig that page as he's hurtling through what ends up to be space, where he sees death and realizes that anything that touches him in this reality, as did with the horse here, is going to kill him instantly. So you see him trying to avoid, and finally finding a silhouette of what is Eternity from the older comics, and I'm sure who will make an appearance in this new series, and uses that as kind of a solace, or kind of like a I'm having problems thinking of the word, but just kind of a harbor of something where he won't be harmed, basically. And as he's in there, the surrounding death is kind of enclosing around him, kind of telling him that he can't, there's no way he can escape it, there's nothing he can do. So finally he embraces his fear of death, comes to the realization that he is just a man, and he does have fears just like every other man, and death is something that he really fears. So he finally lets himself go and kind of completely embraces his fear and actually dies. And in that, death kind of defeats death and is transported to where he comes face to face with the Ancient One, his master, who kind of tells him that this was kind of a test on his road to becoming a sorcerer supreme, and now it's up to him to kind of take the next step. There will be more tests, but he's not going to be warned about them, just as he wasn't warned about this one. Which leads us to the final kind of, it's not quite a letdown, but it's nothing mind-blowing of an issue. It's kind of my least favorite. Cloak and Dagger is the episode, December 1974, issue number 5, his final kind of confrontation with the Silver Dagger. So in this you get a bit of the Silver Dagger's backstory. And his kind of spirit, his soul, kind of comes back and floats throughout the mansion, finds the mannequin that had its head cut off, mistakes it for his body, and enters it, which gets hacked to pieces. Finally joins with Clea, which is a pretty good scene, actually. It's a pretty good part where they kind of meld together, and she uses his powers, and they kind of come to be one to fight the Silver Dagger, who eventually gets defeated, of course, and sucked into the orb, where he's forced to live out the rest of his time in a circular conversation with the caterpillar, who and the caterpillar couldn't be happier, is the last kind of notion that we have. But the reunited Clea and Doctor Strange back for more adventures in number 6. Yeah, so there you go. The first 5 in my ongoing reviews of Doctor Strange. I'm hoping to do one of these videos once a month, I hope. We'll see. I hope you enjoyed it, and we'll talk to you soon.